In the high-stakes world of corporate leadership, where fortunes are built and shattered with a signature, trust becomes both a coveted asset and a perilous vulnerability. When a powerful CEO is targeted by a calculated betrayal, salvation arrives in the most unexpected form, the whispered warning of a child, setting in motion a chain of events that unearths not only conspiracy but also the profound and unbreakable bonds of family. Silence. Not a sound. The small voice, laced with an urgency that belied its tender years, pierced the hushed atmosphere of the executive parking area. Julian Thorne, 52, the respected CEO of Thorne Innovations, paused, his hand hovering over the door of his polished obsidian sedan. The command had originated from within his vehicle. Adjusting his gaze to the shadowed interior, he discerned a young girl of African descent, no older than 7, nestled in the back seat. Her eyes, wide pools of apprehension, darted towards the gleaming skyscraper that housed his company. "They're listening," she breathed, gesturing subtly towards the illuminated upper levels. "Your partner and his fair-haired wife. They anticipated your arrival." Julian, a man who had scaled the heights of the tech industry through vision and tenacity, had never foreseen his carefully constructed world tilting on the axis of a chance encounter with a child who appeared to be living on the streets. He had placed unwavering faith in his business partner of 15 years, Alistair Finch, and his efficient executive assistant of a decade, Serena Hayes. "How did you manage to get inside?" Julian inquired softly, easing into the driver's seat with deliberate calm. "The cleaning crew left it unsecured when they finished," the girl explained. "I overheard them discussing you upstairs and sought refuge here." Her youthful eyes, intelligent and perceptive despite her disheveled appearance, held his gaze. "They intend for you to relinquish ownership tomorrow," she stated with a gravity beyond her years. A chill snaked down Julian's spine. The following day held the pivotal meeting with prospective European investors for a substantial merger, a transaction meticulously orchestrated by Alistair and Serena. "What else did you overhear?" he asked, his fingers subtly manipulating his phone while his attention remained fixed on the brightly lit windows of the 10th floor. "That you are perceived as naive and will be presented with documents meant to deceive." The woman with light hair, she continued, had chuckled, remarking that by week's end, Julian would be searching for employment. The girl then recoiled slightly. "They spoke of you with unkindness, sir, but my grandmother cautioned against repeating harsh words." A complex blend of indignation and an unexpected surge of protectiveness washed over Julian. This courageous child had jeopardized her own safety to alert a stranger to impending treachery. "What is your name?" he asked gently. "Nadia." "And you are Julian Thorne," as they mentioned it repeatedly. She hesitated, a flicker of concern in her eyes. "Will you now summon the authorities?" For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Julian offered a genuine smile. "No, Nadia. In fact, you may have just safeguarded everything I have strived to build." Through the rearview mirror, he observed the office lights extinguishing floor by floor. Alistair and Serena were likely descending now, secure in their belief that tomorrow would mark Julian's downfall. Little did they know that their target had just acquired the most improbable of allies. Nadia, unknowingly, had bestowed upon him something far more valuable than any boardroom strategy: time to prepare. As he drove away from the building, Julian's mind was already piecing together a counter-strategy. Yet, the question lingered: why would a child of 7 risk everything for a man she had never met? The answer to that very question would not only reshape Julian's understanding of betrayal but also unveil a profound and unforeseen connection. As Julian navigated the quiet city streets, Nadia's words echoed in his thoughts, each phrase a piece of a puzzle now rapidly forming a coherent picture. In the back seat, Nadia remained vigilant, her gaze sweeping across the side mirrors. "Did they mention anything further?" she inquired softly. "The woman with the light hair commented that you place unwavering trust in them, akin to a loyal pet," Nadia recounted, a hint of distaste in her voice. She then added that tomorrow you would discover that even the most docile creatures can turn and bite. The casual cruelty of that remark struck Julian with visceral force. 15 years of partnership, 10 years of implicit trust in Serena, and they regarded him as a mere pawn in their avaricious game. Where do you reside, Nadia? Julian asked, his voice gentle. Nowhere in particular, she replied with a shrug that tugged at his heart. Sometimes at the shelter, sometimes on the streets. It depends on availability and whether the other children are causing undue trouble. Julian stopped at a red light, turning to face her directly. Why did you warn me, Nadia? You do not even know me. Nadia's young eyes held a depth of understanding that belied her age. Because I recognize what it is like to be unseen. They spoke of you as if you were unintelligent, as if you were inconsequential. Her voice gained a resolute quality. My grandmother always said, when you witness someone being unjustly treated and possess the means to help, you must act, for tomorrow it could be you. The light turned green, yet Julian remained still for a moment longer, absorbing the profound lesson in empathy imparted by this small child. 20 minutes later, they sat in a quiet diner. Nadia hungrily devoured a cheeseburger while Julian nursed a cooling cup of coffee. His phone vibrated. A message from Alistair, all set for tomorrow, partner. The Europeans are enthusiastic about our proposal. You're on the cusp of a comfortable retirement. Julian showed the message to Nadia, who offered a wry smile. He possesses a certain audacity, doesn't he? Deceiving you while maintaining a facade of camaraderie. Nadia paused thoughtfully. My grandmother often spoke of individuals with such duplicitous natures. Julian composed a cordial response, masking the growing fury within. Serena, too, was complicit. She had intimate knowledge of his schedule and unfettered access to all aspects of the company. And they intend to deceive you tomorrow, Nadia affirmed. Julian offered a genuine smile for the first time that evening. No, Nadia, but they must remain unaware that we are now privy to their scheme. Another message arrived, this time from Serena. Julian, the final agreements have been reviewed. Everything is in order for the signing. Continue to place your trust in me, as you always have. The coldness veiled beneath the veneer of warmth sent a shiver down Julian's spine. For a decade, Serena had been his confidant, the orchestrator of his professional life, privy to his schedules, passwords, and vulnerabilities. Do they possess knowledge that could harm you? Nadia inquired, licking ketchup from her fingers. They have access to everything. Bank credentials, company accounts, the location of critical documents. The gravity of the betrayal began to weigh heavily on Julian. They have had years to lay this groundwork. Nadia's sharp mind considered this. But you, too, have accumulated information about them over the years, haven't you? Julian paused, a glass halfway to his lips. Nadia was astute. 15 years of partnership, 10 years of executive assistance, he possessed his own arsenal of knowledge. Alistair's clandestine meetings with competitors, which he believed went unnoticed. Serena's self-serving manipulation of the bonus structure. The inadvertently seen emails. The overheard conversations during moments they assumed his attention was elsewhere. You possess remarkable insight, Nadia, Julian remarked. My grandmother taught me that when one is little, one learns to observe everything with great care, she replied, dabbing her lips with a napkin. They underestimate your capabilities, but they are mistaken, aren't they? Julian smiled, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years stirring within him, a potent blend of hope and resolve. Indeed, they are. His phone rang. Alistair, no doubt seeking to finalize their deceptive preparations. Julian answered, his voice exuding a warmth he did not feel. Julian, good to hear from you. Serena and I are here, completing the final arrangements. Are you resting well? Tomorrow is a significant day. Excellent, Alistair. I eagerly anticipate how everything unfolds. It will be flawless. Trust me, we have attended to every detail. Your only task is to arrive and sign where Serena indicates. The sheer arrogance in Alistair's tone was almost palpable. They genuinely believed they had reduced Julian to a mere figurehead, blindly following their script. After ending the call, Nadia watched him intently. You are formulating a plan, aren't you? Your eyes have changed. Every dismissive word, every veiled lie, Every insincere smile from recent months now clicked into sharp focus. Alistair and Serena had not merely betrayed his trust, they had fundamentally misjudged his capacity to retaliate. What they failed to comprehend was a fundamental principle Julian had learned over years of building businesses: the most effective strategies are often the quietest. And while they prematurely celebrated their anticipated triumph, Julian was poised to transform their very arrogance into the instrument of their undoing. The following morning, Julian awoke with a mental clarity he had not experienced in months. Nadia was still asleep on the living room sofa, enveloped in a blanket. He paused, watching the child who had so profoundly altered the trajectory of his life in a single night. His phone vibrated. A message from Serena at 6:15 a.m. "Good morning, Julian. I've been at the office since 5 o'clock, ensuring all is prepared. The European delegation arrives at 2 p.m. Simply place your confidence in me and endorse the documents where I've indicated, as per our usual practice." A bitter smile played on Julian's lips. The same Serena who was diligently working to strip him of everything was now feigning devoted professionalism. "You are devising something," Nadia said, stretching on the sofa, her eyes sharp. "Your gaze is different. It reminds me of when my grandmother discerned a falsehood." "I require your assistance, Nadia," Julian replied. "Could you return there today and listen to any further conversations they might have?" The girl sat up, her expression instantly serious. "That is perilous." "I am aware," Julian affirmed. "Therefore, I will arrange for someone to ensure your safety." During his restless night, Julian had made a decision. "I know a private investigator, Elias Vance. He previously conducted background checks for significant clients." Elias answered on the second ring, his voice familiar and somewhat guarded. "Julian?" A surprise. "I assumed I had become a distant memory after my contract was terminated last year." The irony was not lost on Julian. Elias had been let go under the guise of budget constraints, a decision orchestrated by Alistair and Serena. Now, Julian understood the true motive: Elias's sharp intellect and persistent inquiries had posed a threat. "Elias, I want you to know that your dismissal was not my decision," Julian stated firmly. A brief silence hung in the air, followed by a low chuckle. "I rather suspected as much. Alistair was never fond of investigators unearthing inconvenient truths. What do you require?" 2 hours later, Elias sat in Julian's kitchen, observing Nadia with a mixture of admiration and concern. Elias, a man in his mid-40s with the bearing of a former law enforcement officer, possessed a gaze that missed nothing. "So, this young lady has uncovered a corporate conspiracy worth hundreds of millions," Elias remarked, shaking his head in impressed disbelief. "Nadia, you possess a natural aptitude for this. My grandmother always said that when one has little material wealth, one learns to listen intently to everything," she replied, taking a bite of toast. Elias produced a tablet from his bag. "Julian, while Nadia was safeguarding your enterprise, I conducted some discreet inquiries of my own. I never fully accepted the circumstances of my termination." His fingers danced across the screen, revealing a network of spreadsheets and financial documents. "Alistair and Serena are not merely disloyal, they are engaged in significant financial malfeasance." The evidence was damning: irregular transactions, fabricated invoices, and fictitious clientele. For the past 2 years, they have been systematically diverting millions from the company, creating an intricate web of shell corporations, Elias explained. "This proposed merger is not about expansion, it is about laundering illicit funds. They require your signature to validate retroactive transfers. Following that, you will be removed, and their financial manipulations will be effectively concealed." A cold fury settled in Julian's chest. This was not simply a personal betrayal, it was calculated criminal activity. "They have been pilfering from the very foundation I built," he murmured. "They exploited my trust to fuel their own corruption." Nadia leaned forward, her eyes gleaming. "Now it becomes intriguing. They believe you are foolish, but you have an investigator and a clever girl on your side, and they remain oblivious to this." Julian's phone chimed. "Alistair, undoubtedly. Partner, I trust you rested well. Serena and I have been here since dawn, finalizing the last details. The Europeans will be immensely impressed by our organization. I am certain they will, Alistair, Julian replied, his voice carefully devoid of emotion. One final detail, Alistair continued, and Julian could almost hear the predatory smile in his tone. Serena suggested you need not concern yourself with reviewing the documents today. They are rather technical, and you have always placed your faith in our expertise, correct? Simply arrive and sign where Serena indicates. The sheer arrogance was nauseating. They genuinely believed they could pilfer a fortune and still elicit gratitude. After ending the call, Elias studied Julian intently. You have two options: contact the authorities immediately and attempt to prove all of this in court, risking the possibility of them evading justice on technicalities, or allow them to proceed with their plan, but not as the unsuspecting victim they anticipate. Instead, you attend as the predator they never imagined you could be. Nadia clapped her hands together with excitement, like a character in a film. You pretend to sign, but you are already aware of everything. Elias offered his first genuine smile since arriving. Precisely. And while they are celebrating prematurely, you present them to the authorities, caught in the act with irrefutable evidence. His phone vibrated again. A message from Serena. Julian, you are the most exceptional leader a person could ask for. After today, I am certain our professional relationship will endure indefinitely. The sheer hypocrisy turned Julian's stomach. Serena was not merely stealing, she was reveling in the planned humiliation. They perceive me as a sentimental fool, Julian stated, placing his phone aside. They mistake my kindness for weakness. Elias closed his tablet, his gaze hardening. Then it is time to demonstrate that kindness, coupled with strategic intellect, can be a lethal combination. Nadia sprang from the couch, her eyes bright with determination. And I can assist. I can conceal myself near the meeting room and record everything on your phone. For a fleeting moment, Julian hesitated. She was a child. But then he recalled her bravery in warning him. Very well, he agreed finally. But Elias will be monitoring you at all times. Elias nodded. It will be my distinct pleasure to witness their realization that they have severely underestimated their adversaries. As they finalized their strategy, Julian felt a sensation he had not experienced in years, the thrill of the hunt. Alistair and Serena had dedicated 2 years to constructing their elaborate trap. What they failed to foresee was that within hours, that very trap would ensnare them with a force that would shatter not only their scheme but their entire existence. For 15 years, Julian had been the trusting partner, the understanding superior, a man who consistently sought the best in others. Today, they would confront a far more formidable aspect of kindness, the quiet resolve that awakens when patience reaches its limit. The meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m., but by 2:05 p.m., Alistair and Serena would discover that the silent lamb they intended to lead to slaughter possessed unexpectedly sharp teeth. And today, Julian intended to use them all. At precisely 2 p.m., Julian entered the Thorn Innovations conference room, his demeanor betraying no hint of the impending storm. Alistair and Serena were already present, meticulously arranging stacks of documents with the focused precision of surgeons preparing for a critical operation. Julian! Alistair exclaimed, rising with a wide, seemingly genuine smile, embracing him warmly. Glad you could make it. The European delegation is en route, and everything is in perfect order. Serena approached, carrying a sleek leather briefcase, her smile radiating a practiced, almost maternal assurance. Julian, simply endorse the documents where I have placed these adhesive markers. Trust me, as you invariably do, her tone held a subtle condescension, as if addressing a child. Of course, Julian replied calmly. But first, I wish to share some rather intriguing information I came across last evening. As he spoke, Elias Vance entered the room, carrying a box of files, followed by 2 uniformed federal investigators. Alistair and Serena exchanged fleeting glances, their smiles remaining fixed. Elias, Alistair said, a slight furrow appearing on his brow. I was under the impression your services were no longer required. They are, Elias responded dryly. However, my current employer is the rightful owner of this company. Julian connected his laptop to the room's projector. Alistair, Serena, do you recall this exchange? The screen illuminated with detailed spreadsheets outlining a series of unauthorized financial transfers, dates, and substantial sums, $5,300,000 embezzled over a 2-year period. Serena's smile faltered for the first time. Julian, what is the meaning of this? Some ill-conceived jest? A jest? Julian clicked to the next slide. Photographs appeared, Alistair entering and exiting anonymous offshore banks, signed documents bearing unfamiliar corporate seals, a complex network of shell company affiliations. You established 17 such entities to launder the funds you systematically stole from me. Alistair rose abruptly, his carefully constructed facade of geniality finally cracking. Where did you procure this? This information is confidential. Confidential? Julian chuckled softly. Alistair, did you genuinely believe I built a company of this scale without acquiring the means to safeguard my own interests? Serena, though attempting to maintain her composure, clutched the briefcase with visibly trembling hands. Julian, you misunderstand. These transactions have perfectly legitimate explanations. Elias interjected, handing a sealed envelope to each of the investigators. Enclosed are recordings of numerous conversations between these two individuals, meticulously detailing their plans for this fraudulent merger. He then placed a second envelope on the table. And these are the signed testimonies of 3 fictitious clients they fabricated, all prepared to testify under oath. Alistair's face flushed crimson with a mixture of rage and dawning panic. You cannot prove anything. These are merely baseless accusations. Julian offered his first genuine smile since entering the room. Alistair, do you recall Nadia? Who in God's name is Nadia? Just then, the door opened, and Nadia entered, accompanied by a social worker. Her young eyes, however, held a resolute gleam as she walked directly to the conference table. Hello, Mr. Alistair, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. Do you remember me? I was concealed beneath your desk last night when you telephoned Mr. Yamamoto, discussing your intention to unlawfully seize Mr. Julian's company. The silence in the room was absolute. Alistair's mouth opened and closed several times, his composure utterly shattered. Serena attempted one final gambit, her voice rising with desperation. A child? You intend to give credence to a street urchin over respected professionals? Elias retrieved his phone and played a recording. Serena's voice echoed through the room, chillingly clear, Julian is a sentimental fool. By week's end, he will be unemployed, and we will possess everything. Alistair's voice followed, 15 years feigning friendship with that imbecile. It will have been worth every agonizing second when I witnessed the devastation on his face upon realizing his loss. Serena sank into her chair, her face ashen. Alistair slammed his fist on the table, the force scattering documents. You treacherous bastard. You orchestrated this. Julian remained composed, his voice low but cutting. I did not orchestrate this, Alistair. You and Serena have been diligently digging your own grave for 2 years. I merely provided the shovels. One of the investigators stepped forward. Alistair Finch and Serena Hayes, you are under arrest for embezzlement, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit corporate fraud. As the handcuffs clicked around Alistair's wrists, he snarled, This is far from over, Julian. I will destroy you. Julian rose, adjusting his tie with his characteristic calm. Alistair, you have already attempted to destroy me. The crucial difference is, I possess a greater aptitude for it. Serena wept silently as she was escorted from the room, but Julian felt no remorse, recalling the countless times she had offered insincere smiles while plotting his ruin. Nadia approached him, gently tugging on his hand. Mr. Julian, are they truly going to prison? Yes, Nadia. For a considerable time. Elias closed his briefcase with a distinct air of satisfaction. Julian, the European delegation has postponed their visit upon learning of the ongoing investigation. However, 3 other reputable firms have already expressed interest in legitimate partnerships. Your company will emerge stronger than ever, free from these parasitic elements. Its true value will now be realized. As the room emptied, Julian gazed out the window, watching the police vehicle depart. For 15 years, he had trusted Alistair implicitly. For 10 years, he had treated Serena as a valued member of his extended professional family. They had mistaken his inherent kindness for weakness, his trust for foolishness. Nadia remained by his side, observing the same scene. "Mr. Julian, are you saddened?" He looked down at the girl who had salvaged his life's work. "No, Nadia. For the first time in years, I feel a sense of peace." "Why?" she asked, her brow furrowed. "Because I have been reminded that there are individuals in this world like you, Nadia, people who choose to do what is right, even when there is no apparent personal gain." Outside, Alistair and Serena were confronting the stark reality that their arrogance had cost them not only their careers but their freedom. Inside the room, Julian understood that sometimes, the most profound gift of betrayal is the clarity it provides in discerning who truly merits one's trust. Yet, a fundamental question remained, one that held the potential to reshape everything. What compels a child of 7 to risk her own well-being to save a complete stranger? The answer would unveil a connection that even Julian, with all his acumen, could not have possibly imagined. 6 months later, Julian sat in his expansive new office, high above the city, the revitalized Thorn Innovations thriving. Elias knocked on the door, a file in hand, a knowing smile on his face. "An update on our former associates," he announced. Alistair received a 12-year sentence, Serena, 8. All their assets have been liquidated, their properties seized to compensate the company. Their legal representation withdrew when the attempted bribery of witnesses came to light. Julian nodded, a quiet sense of closure settling over him, devoid of vindictiveness. "And the other victims?" he inquired. "We identified 7 other business professionals they defrauded over the past 5 years. All are pursuing legal action and recovering their losses. Their scheme was far more extensive than initially suspected." Just then, Nadia burst into the office, returning from the esteemed private school Julian had enrolled her in. Her uniform was immaculate, her new backpack slung over her shoulder, her eyes radiating the same sharp intelligence, now nurtured by education and security. "Mr. Julian. I received an A on my mathematics examination," she exclaimed, proudly displaying her paper. "Excellent work, Nadia." "I knew you were capable," Julian responded warmly. Elias chuckled, observing their interaction. "It remains remarkable how a child of 7 could rescue a company worth hundreds of millions." "Actually," Julian began, kneeling to meet Nadia's gaze, "there is something you both need to know. Something I discovered several weeks ago." He produced a folder of legal documents. "Nadia, do you recall your grandmother's full name?" "Certainly." "Josephine Vance Thorn," she replied, a hint of confusion in her voice. Elias raised his eyebrows, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. "Thorn, like?" Julian opened the folder, revealing birth certificates, genealogical charts, and faded photographs. "Josephine Vance Thorn was my cousin, my father's sister's daughter, with whom our family lost contact over 3 decades ago." An absolute silence filled the room. Nadia looked from the documents to Julian, her young mind grappling with the revelation. "That signifies that we are family," Julian said softly, his voice filled with emotion. "Your grandmother spoke of you often to the social services, of your intelligence and bravery. When I initiated inquiries after that night in the garage, everything began to align." Nadia threw her arms around Julian, tears streaming down her face. "I knew it. I sensed there was something different. Grandmother always said that family protects family." Elias cleared his throat, visibly moved. "So, her warning about the conspiracy, it was an instinct of familial protection." Julian finished the thought. "She was not consciously aware of our connection, but something within her recognized the bond." 3 months later, the formal adoption ceremony took place in the same courthouse where Alistair and Serena had been convicted. Nadia, now legally Nadia Thorne, wore a delicate blue dress and held Julian's hand tightly. The judge smiled as he signed the final documents. It is rare to witness a narrative that commences with criminal activity and culminates in a family reunited. Later, at the celebratory dinner, Nadia looked at Julian with a seriousness beyond her years. "Mr. Julian. I mean, Dad, do you believe Grandmother knew this was destined to happen?" Julian pondered the question, recalling the seemingly miraculous way Nadia had entered his life precisely when he needed her most. "I believe your grandmother possessed a wisdom we may never fully comprehend, and I am certain she would be immensely proud of the courage you displayed in saving our family." On the first anniversary of Alistair and Serena's arrests, Julian received 2 letters in the same week. The first, from Alistair in prison, was a self-pitying attempt at apology, suggesting the entire affair had been a misunderstanding. The second, from Serena, also from prison, placed all blame on Alistair and portrayed herself as a victim. Julian tore both letters into shreds without finishing them. "They still fail to grasp it," Nadia remarked, observing the discarded pieces of paper. "It is not about forgiveness or holding on to resentment. It is about moving forward and striving to be better." The wisdom of this child continued to astound Julian. 5 years later, Thorne Innovations had become one of the nation's leading technology firms. Julian established a foundation providing scholarships and housing for vulnerable children, supporting over 200 young lives annually. Nadia, now 12, served as the honorary president of the program, personally selecting beneficiaries and mentoring other children facing similar hardships to those she had overcome. "Do you know what the most significant day of my life was?" Nadia asked during the foundation's anniversary gala. "What was that, Nadia?" Julian replied, his eyes filled with affection. "The day I climbed into your car and chose to trust you. Because on that day, I was not merely saving your company, I was saving our family." Julian smiled, looking at the girl who had become his daughter and his greatest source of pride. Alistair and Serena had sought to destroy everything he had built, but in their greed, they had inadvertently gifted him the most precious thing he could ever possess, a family forged not just by blood, but by courage, loyalty, and unconditional love. He had learned that true retribution lies not in the destruction of one's adversaries but in the creation of something so beautiful and enduring that their betrayal becomes but a footnote in the ongoing narrative of one's triumph. Alistair and Serena had attempted to steal his company but ultimately bestowed upon him immeasurably more than they could ever have imagined: a daughter, a renewed sense of purpose, and irrefutable proof that the universe often employs the most unlikely of individuals to deliver precisely what we need.